Hello guys, welcome into today's tournament recap. The event I'm going to be recapping on these next set of videos was a tournament held a couple weeks ago. Very, very strong local event. 2 Grandmasters, an IM, at least 1 FM. 2 sections, open and reserve. The reserve was open to anybody under 2200. And the open was obviously anybody could play. Very, very strong event in the event that a lot of people opted to play in the open section for the experience. So the reserve section ended up being very, very tiny. A lot of 1,000, 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 and above opted to play open. So the first game, I was not at the top of the standings, obviously, with the Class A USCF rating of 1840. And I was not at the bottom because there were so many lower rated people that opted to play. I was somewhere in the middle. So my first round opponent, I had the white pieces. I had already predetermined that I was going to take a round to buy. It was a 6-round tournament, and I wanted to play my indoor soccer games on Friday night. So I had the white pieces. My opponent played a French defense. Not sure how familiar my opponent is with these openings. He's a lower rated opponent. He could be familiar with this stuff or just learning. I made the decision to play the King's Indian attack. The idea to go knight d2, knight f3, g3, bishop g2 stuff and attack on the king side. In hindsight, if I had this game over to play, I would play just the main line d4. Really overthinking it, especially playing someone so much lower rated. There's really no reason to avoid mainline theory. If they do manage to outplay me in the opening as a significantly lower rated opponent, then props to them. But opted to play a King's Indian attack, c5. So basically pretty standard moves here. Knight f3, knight c6, g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, castles, and knight g7. So black is going to castle kingside, and I am probably going to attack on the king side. Is going to be my goal. Usually black will aim for some sort of queenside expansion, a6, b5, b5, a5, play on the queen side. So a very, very double-edged game. Again, considering the rating disparity, my opponent plays the opening very, very well. Just further proof that you can't always trust what someone's posted rating is. So I went knight bd2. One of the ideas I'm looking at is at some point he's probably going to go d6 or d5. If he goes d5, I want to make this pawn push e5 if possible. But obviously if he goes d5, I can't go e5 here because I blunder a pawn. He has 2 attackers, I have 1 defender. And so knight d2, what we want to do is play rook e1. And then we're going to reshuffle this knight somewhere. Sometimes to f1, we play h4, knight h2, knight g4. Attack on the king side, or rook e1, knight f1. Knight e3 is also a possibility. And then occasionally, depending on what they play, you could also put the knight on c4. And that's what happens in this game. He castles, and I played rook e1. So if he goes d5, what I want to do is play e5. Gain some space with this e-pawn, and then start building up some sort of kingside initiative. Very, very solid position for black. My opponent plays e5, which is one of the best moves here. So on one hand, he is taking further control over this d4 square. You notice he has the 2 pawns and the knight are controlling d4, which is very nice. So if I was thinking of playing some move like c3, d4, it makes it very, very hard to execute this breakthrough in the center of the board. Plus, e5 is the move I wanted to play with the white pieces, and he's taken that away from me. So adapting to what the situation requires now I don't have the e5 push, which is pretty thematic, but I have some potential other squares that I could put pieces on that I didn't have access to before. The main one being this d5 square, potentially. And I decided that I would like to go knight c4 right away, but then that might run into b5, which just helps my opponent gain space on the queen side, which is what he wants to do anyway, usually in this opening. So I just decided to play a preventive move, which is a4. So locking down on this b5 square and giving myself knight b5 without him being able to kick my knight away right away. And then he goes d6. The other thing I thought was possible was a d5. So really wasn't sure what he would play. I am curious to see what the reading is on d5. Because it's not a top 3 move. Okay, so computer thinks after ed5, knight d5, knight c4. White is actually slightly better. Guess because we have this nice long diagonal that we're looking at. We have some nice pressure on e5. Again, it's not a lot. Black can play f6, defend e5 again. But white is slightly better. So I guess d5 would be a very natural move, but it's not the best move. Okay, so d6, knight c4, and bishop e6. And here, the first thing we obviously have to ask ourselves is, are we worried about bishop takes c4 as a move? Are we worried about bishop takes c4? And I was able to pretty quickly evaluate this position and say I'm actually not worried about bishop takes c4. The reason being, if I say like I play a move, like I played in the game, knight g5, telling black, if you want to give me the bishop pair with bishop c4, I'm very, very comfortable in that position. And the idea is bishop takes c4, dc4, if that is indeed what my opponent is thinking about doing. You guys notice we have amazing control over this d5 square. So now it is impossible for him to execute the d5 pawn break because we have so much coverage over that square. And you might say, well, can't the knight on c6 go to the nice square d4? And that doesn't really do anything because we have c3. So the knight looked aesthetically very, very good on the d4 square, but it can't actually stay on the d4 square. He's just going to have to move it back somewhere, knight e6 or knight c6. Whereas if you could picture if somehow this knight on g5 got to d5, this is a piece that cannot be kicked away by pawns. It can be traded. He can trade something. But the e6, he has no pawns on e or c that could kick a piece away from d5. So this would be very pleasant for me. Also, these c pawns are not weaknesses. In order to prove that c4 is a weakness, you would have to be able to target c2 first. And knight a5, there's just b3. And in order to make c4 a weakness, you'd have to make c2 a weakness. You'd have to make b3. And then you could take on c4. And that's just not going to happen. That's not a logical plan, and it's not going to work. So here I was very curious to see what my opponent will play. The best move is actually to maintain the bishop pair and just drop back to c8, with the idea to play h6 and kick my knight back. And then he could redeploy his bishop to that same square if he wants. But my opponent played queen d7, so in here is kind of where my opponent starts going astray. Up until this point, he's played a very, very solid opening. And here I figured I've gone to the effort to go knight g5 to either provoke bishop c4 or to take on e6. So I'm going to take the bishop, and white is slightly better here because he has the bishop pair. And now black's best move would be to actually play queen takes e6, not creating any weaknesses in his position. But my opponent played f takes e6. I don't know if he liked the fact that his rook was on an open file, and he's trying to activate it that way, but all I see is a pawn weakness on e6 that can't move, and that can be quickly targeted with bishop h3. And here, it's gone from being slightly better to white to being +1. Again, not a winning position, but white is slowly but surely building an initiative. Again, I thought initially he might be going for a move like d5, trying to be active. The real issue with this move is you could do two things. You could just drop back to d2, and you could maintain the tension in the position. Maybe go queen g4, target e6 is an idea. You don't want to be potentially making moves that could give him a chance to fix his structure in some of these types of positions. But actually here you can take on d5. The reason being, obviously, e takes, we have bishop takes queen, so that's not a move. But if he goes queen d5, or even knight d5, you notice our pieces have very, very nice pressure in the position. And this is a big initiative for white. We have a target on e6. We can target this e5 pawn. Our knight and our rook are very natural. The bishop can come somewhere. And then we could just work on building, slowly but surely building up pressure on these pawns in the center of the board. Black is going to have to passively defend, and white is actually winning at this point. So d5, my initial thoughts would have been I would go knight d2, but actually ed5 is just completely winning from a positional perspective. So he didn't play d5, but he instead, after playing a really good game to this point, played a6, which is obviously atrocious blunder because it allows knight b6 forking. And not only that, the queen cannot even defend e6. So she's going to have to move away, and we're actually going to take e6 first with check, which is what happened. King h8 and knight a8. So right now we have a rook and a pawn in our hand. Obviously, black has to take back the knight in the corner. And so now I have a rook and a pawn for a knight. So completely winning. And I'm not going to try to talk too much about the conversion here. You could do this a lot of different ways. I'm just going to point out a few interesting moments. Bishop e3, just want a complete development. Obviously, we're going to save our bishop here. h3 was good as well. c3, I wanted to take more control over the b4 and the d4 square. And now that I'm up material, I also might be looking at d4 to open the position. And g5. And here I do regret that I didn't just take on g5. Because rook f2 aesthetically looks really good for black. But looks can be deceiving because we just go rook f1. And now if you notice, we're attacking his rook twice. And he has no other way to defend this rook, so he's going to have to trade pieces. And obviously trades are just going to help me in this scenario because I already have a winning initiative. But I opted to play queen e2. So now we're defending f2. Again, queen e2 completely winning, but bishop takes g5 was just better. h6 defending. Rook f1. Trying to consider right now some sort of pawn breakthrough, whether it's f4 or d4. Need to get these pieces more active and just focus on trying to convert this. Queen e8. Idea of queen e8 basically is to stop my queen from coming into h5. King h1. Before we push the pawns around our king, oftentimes it's useful to slide our king into the corner. So it makes it a little harder for him to get under attack. Queen g6 and queen g4. If black tries to redeploy his knight somewhere, this knight on e7, I was just thinking I have queen c8 and check and take on b7. So kind of locking his knight down more. King h7, he doesn't have a lot of moves. And here I played bishop d5. Takes, and he had knight e7. My plan was to go queen e4 and try to, first of all, we're defending this pawn, and then we're just trying to trade queens. So I figured he's going to go, if he doesn't trade queens, which is just winning for me, he's going to play knight f5 or rook f5 here to avoid a queen exchange. And here I thought g4. g4, again, is completely winning, but I don't like the fact that it gives black a few more options in this position. If I had it over to do a move like b4, just gaining space on the queen side, makes the conversion a little simpler for white. But I played g4 and he played knight h4, and you're gonna see here in a second why this kind of gives black some play and makes white have to think a little bit more. Played d4, and then my opponent here played rook f3, which is very strong. And again, this is a completely winning position, but you don't want to become complacent. The idea is first of all that he is attacking d4 twice. So he's threatening to take a pawn on d4 and attack my bishop. And he's also eyeballing rook h3. And I think I had a little bit too much respect for black's counterplay here, because I was looking at rook h3 and knight f3, threatening mate on h2. But the reality is rook h3 and knight f3, there's just king g2. And I'm attacking both pieces, and he's going to lose something, and he's only going to get a pawn out of it. And I'm already up material, so I played rook a d1. Part of the reason of not taking on e5 is that it helps him activate his bishop. against h2. And you can picture if he could get his bishop to e5, the rook to h3, and the knight to f3, then he could be creating some threats. So we don't just want to rush in and take on e5, rook a d1, and rook h3. And here I came up with an interesting idea. I tried to bait him into losing material. I played the move f3. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, can't he just play knight takes f3? And in fact, he cannot, because there's king g2, and you see we're attacking the rook and his knight twice. So his best move is rook h2, and then we just take on f3, and now we're up even more material than we already were. So trying to bait him into a mistake, and obviously rook f3, we're just trading everything off. Now he has no pressure whatsoever. We could just take on e5. He's probably going to take with, I don't know. He doesn't want to take with the pawn, because then we just push. So bishop. Come in here, I guess. And now h3, and we're just winning. We put the rook on the c file. We bring it to the 7th. We take these pawns, and then we're going to create a queen over here. So trying to bait him into another mistake. And he played this move e4. And initially, I thought this was a really good attempt because I thought fe4 is not possible because of rook e3. But the reality is actually, after e5, white is still winning. Because of the fact that we're going to force through the promotion of this d-pawn. This is winning. And I might confess I didn't spend a lot of time here thinking deeply on whether fe4 works. Not sure if I would have come up with it if I had spent a lot of time thinking about it, but I wanted to... I know now if I'm not taking on e4, he's going to have the knight protected on f3, which is not going to make king g2 a good move. Because then rook takes h2 and I can't take his knight. So I thought I'd need to get the bishop back to g3 or g1 to cover h2. So bishop f2 takes, and now he's threatening rook h2 mate. So bishop g3, we defend and we attack. If the d6 pawn is gone, we can move the bishop out of the way and we should just be able to win easily. h5, take, and now bishop d6. All this is good, and knight d4, bishop g3. Now we're opening. We're 3 squares from promotion. We might push, and we're creating the idea of rook f7 to try to attack this bishop that's the only piece defending the knight. So knight here. I play king g2. Now I'm attacking his rook. And protecting my bishop. And I get out of maybe knight g3 stuff. Because hg3 is not possible. Because of the pin on the h-file on my king. So he defends his rook. But this has an issue as well. There's rook... bishop e8. I should have played rook f7 right away. Again, bishop e8 doesn't blow anything. And now knight d4. And now I go rook f7. And the issue is when he goes knight f5, which is what he played, to defend his bishop, there's rook f5. Now if king f5, we take the rook. And we just win. So he tried rook h8, hitting my bishop. I counterattack his bishop. He takes on b2. I take on b7, defending my bishop, hitting the bishop. And here I thought that he'd probably resign. But he decided to play this out, and I think I got a little too complacent. So the easiest way to win this, there's a lot of different ways, but the easiest way is just to bring the king over. Make sure this e-pawn's never going to be an issue. And if the e-pawn is never allowed to roam free, then you just win easily. But I made it a little more difficult. I played d6, which is winning, but not the best. And he played e3. Now he just wants to go e2, queen, force me to sack, and then try to stop my d-pawn. Again, still winning if I let him queen and take, but more complicated than it needs to be. And here the best move is rook e7. Just give up the bishop because we take the passed pawn. And we're still up so much material, and we're going to push this through, and he's going to have to sacrifice for it. So that would have been the easiest way. I thought rook d3 was good, and this wins as well, but now we have to stop this. Again, rook e7 is better. But I played here. Now we have to sack. And here I made a move that's completely unnecessary. I've made this harder than it needs to be. And at this point, this is where I kind of start to really make life difficult for myself. Up until this point, I've been pretty much in control over this game. But I played bishop c7, which is completely unnecessary. I walk into rook h7, which is what he played, pinning my bishop, making it hard for me to push my d-pawn. The reason I did this is I thought it'd be useful to cut off his bishop's ability to control the queening square with his rook and his bishop, was what I was thinking. But bishop c7 is completely unnecessary. d7 would have been winning. Now I can't push because he just takes. If I lose the d-pawn, I'm no longer winning. Okay. And I gotta apologize here for this next little bit because I took a completely winning position and slowly but surely I ruined this game. Rook a8 blows all my advantage because he now has bishop f4. So I cannot push this pawn because he can just take my bishop if he wants. And then when I queen, he can also sack, which is a draw, which if you consider he was down a rook for a knight and a pawn, then a draw would be a good result. He's also bringing pressure against h2. And here I actually have to be very careful to not get mated. And I blundered here. Taking on a6 turns this into an equal position to a losing position. What I should have played is... Do I have h3 in this position? In some of these positions I had h3. I'm not sure if it works in this line. Here. Here. Now we're attacking his bishop. So you say, well, can't he can just take this. Well, we can queen this. Although this is not trivial either. It still probably should be a draw, but it's not trivial. There's other lines that I missed where h3 would have been winning a few moves ago. But here it's only good for... But I blundered rook a6, which doesn't look like a blunder, but the truth is his king, his bishop, and his rook are way too active. Now I only have two squares. If I go king f1, he has king f3 maybe, threatening an instant mate. And my pieces are not really close to help stop mate threats. So king g1 is what I played. And he played king f3, giving me one last opportunity to save this with d7. And the reason is if he plays bishop takes c7, there's rook c6. And his bishop is kind of overworked. At any point, if we push this pawn and he has to take with the bishop, then we're just going to be able to take the rook. So he's probably going to play some line like check so that his rook is defended. And then when I go to f1, okay, f1 actually loses. h1 is the only move to hold, I guess. And this is equal. This is equal because we are also, on top of threatening his bishop, we're also threatening rook c3, which is going to force, if the king goes to e2 or f2, we have rook c2, and then rook takes g2 and we win. So white still has enough to hold that position, but I missed. d7 was my last chance. And I played bishop b6. And now this is actually forced mate in 9, even though I lost sooner. I was just trying to get my pieces back to help my king. I was trying to avoid bishop e3, king f1, and rook h1 mate. I wanted to have bishop e3 at my disposal. But he just has rook d2. And now his rook, his king, his bishop are all perfect. He's threatening a mate in 1. He has stopped my pawn. And my pieces are just too far away to do me any good. So if I go king f1, there's just mate in 1. So I'd like to stay towards the center of the board, but that doesn't work. So the only thing you can do here to try to prolong this is go king h1 so that you have bishop g1 at your disposal. But that doesn't work either. Rook d6, he didn't need to play this. He could just check, force this, and then go here. And he's really just threatening to go king g3 and win. So if I push, he probably doesn't even have to do anything about that. He probably doesn't even need to take time to... He just goes king g3. Taking away my last escape square. The bishop can't move. And when he queens... When I queen, he gets the gorgeous mate. He doesn't even have to take the queen. So I played king h1. He took. I played a5. At this point, it's too late. I had other defenses a couple moves ago, but now it's too late. A5's not going to save anything. Nothing's going to save the game. I played a5. He checked me. I came back, and then bishop e3. And the issue is I cannot defend this. And if I check him, he just says king g3. So I spent a lot of time here lamenting this game. Thinking about how badly I messed it up in this, you know, from being in complete control. That's why I'm calling this one the game that got away. And I finally just decided to move and just see what he played. But it doesn't matter because he found king g3. And now I have no checks. And my rook cannot participate in defending this. Which means I'm just going to make a move. And he's going to take on g1 and mate me. So... Really probably 2 to 3 takeaways from this game. Maybe 4. Maybe 4. If I had the game over to do, I probably would just play a main line against his French with d4. But the opening is not what cost me. I played the opening fine. In fact, I was completely... He messed up right out of the opening and I had a winning position. So the opening was not the main issue. After here, he's just losing. So that was maybe one takeaway. Again, that's not what cost me this game. G4. Again, G4 is completely winning, forcing the queens off, but I also don't need to give him knight H4, rook F3 down the road, maybe bishop E5. With counterplay, you want to limit your opponent's counterplay and limit your opportunities to make mistakes or have to spend, you know, work really, really hard to have to convert a completely winning position. But G4 was fine. It's not what cost me the game. I think what really cost me was just being too comfortable. Probably around this point, once I had solidified, I had made sure there was no pressure against h2. The bishop wasn't coming to e5, creating threats. Here I was just too comfortable with the position itself. Trusting myself that, you know, there's no possible way that I can mess this up. And that happens. What else? Yeah. Oh, sorry. There's no reason to, back here. Back in this position, guys. There's no reason to let him push the e-pawn. So I should have probably taken a little bit of time here and just focus on finding the best line. Again, there's dangers sometimes with being too comfortable. If you go king f2, this pawn's never going to do damage. And honestly, if the king goes to e3, he's probably just... It wouldn't surprise me if he just resigned at that point. This gave him hope. White is still winning. Again... I missed rook e7 a couple of times. I should have slowed down. Seen that. This is completely winning. I've made it harder than I need to, but d7 is just winning on the spot. There's danger when you kind of know that you let a game slip away. And sometimes that can cloud your vision. I knew I was still winning here. But really in here, I should have really slowed down and focused on finding the best move. And the best move is actually h3. So this is the position I was talking. the thing is that if he plays rook h3, his rook is no longer stopping this pawn. So we just go d7. He's going to go rook up, and then, well, here we could just take, and then queen. So he can't stop the pawn. And you guys noticed that when he had the bishop on f4, he was targeting h2. And that was the source of all his counterplay. So h3, he can't really take the pawn. He has to move his king. And at that point, I could probably just go get the a pawn. And then I have two passed pawns. But rook e8 also, just cutting his king off from the defense is also very strong. The idea to go rook e7. So missing h3 a couple times was big. I was already kind of kicking myself at this point that I let the game get to this point. And then bishop f4. And now you actually have to find king g1. But obviously I didn't find that. And once my opponent got the winning position, this is the last chance. King f3. He missed d7. This would have been the last opportunity to say. But at this point, I think I had already convinced myself I was lost. But I think that's just a good reminder to just slow down, refocus, and look at the board. I had plenty of time to find d7. And obviously, a draw would have still been disappointing considering how much in control I was over this game, but would have been better than a loss. But I give my opponent's props for finding this didn't happen. I resigned on king g3. I give my opponent's props for once I messed up for just his fighting spirit. But at this point, I think it was within an hour of when the next round was supposed to start, so round 2. And I had already planned on cutting it out for the night and going to my indoor soccer game. My goal was to be sitting at 1.5 though. So I knew I briefly debated canceling that buy and playing round 2. So that I could try to get myself back in the discussion for a stronger pairing later. Because I'd only get 4 games if I took a buy at this point. So, but I decided it was still close enough to my second round starting that I wasn't sure how quickly I'd be able to mentally recover from this game. Again, I'm not saying like I don't lose I never lose games, so I don't know what that feels like. I do lose games. But losing games in this fashion to me is completely different. When you're dominating, 90% of the game, and then you let your opponent come all the way back. I mean, to think at this point I would lose this position is a very hard mental pill to swallow. It's not like I even got outplayed. He was stubborn, and then I blundered. I started blundering. So, anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed that, learned something. Again, chess is a difficult game. And this was definitely one that got away. But we'll see how I recover when I do my round 3 recap again, because I skipped round 2. Thank you guys for watching. Feel free to please leave some comments in the chat down below. And let me know what you think of this. Let me know what you think of my teaching. If you have any advice, things you like, things you would like to see me do different. Yeah. Also, I've got a few other links to my social media profiles. If you guys want to give those a follow, keep up with my chess, keep up with my educational content. I definitely appreciate that. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch. Signing off. I'll be back with a round 3 recap at a later point.